I've hit like rock bottom in different ways of just really feeling like low. If I achieved a certain thing or if I failed, then I would notice this kind of the voice of like, you're not good enough. And I just wanted to change that voice, and I wanted to address where that kind of narrative came from.
My guest today is professional golfer JP Cleveland. JP is a mental health advocate and a man with a growth mindset who continually shows up to put in the work and become a better human being. JP joined the ranks of professional golf in 2023 and is actively battling for his spot, grinding it out on the mini tour circuit while simultaneously building a life of purpose off the course. He came on the show today to talk about what that journey actually looks like from the inside and how he's building a life that he doesn't want to escape.
Meditation really helped me build that muscle of awareness, and from there, once I would have that awareness, it would allow me to detach and no longer assign like emotions or assign identity or ego to those different thoughts. If I didn't achieve enough, then I wouldn't feel loved at home by my family and friends. Like if I was in relationships with girls or friends or family, I would always notice myself striving and doing and feeling like I really had to perform and achieve to earn validation and love. So your body doesn't know the difference between like nervousness and excitement. Mm-hmm. It's only your mind that tells you the difference. So,
as you move through life, living as intentionally as you do, does any of this ever feel like a burden to you?
Dude, fantastic question. I think at points it has felt heavy, but then I realized
I started the show because as I personally consumed countless hours of podcasts over the years, I always found myself wishing that the host would dig deeper into the struggles that the guest faced and not just highlight their success, sticking to the script like every other host. The Stupid Gap podcast is built around the belief that everyone is the hero in their own story, and just like all heroes, they've experienced hardships along the way. I'm a one-man band, and I strive to level up my skills with each and every episode so that you get the best experience possible. If this resonates with you, or if you found this show to be valuable or entertaining in any way, please consider subscribing. Your support would mean the world to me. Thank you so much. Enjoy. All right, man. JP Cleveland.
yes, sir.
What's
Ryan,
up, brother? Man, what are you excited about in this season of your life right now?
It's a good question, bro. I would say that I'm really excited about the current relationships with my family and friends in this season of life, where over the past year and a half, from different career stuff through pro golf and everything like that, it's really helped put things in perspective of realizing that, hey, like I want to like spend a lot of time on this planet with people like I love and invest in quality relationships with friends, family, loved ones, and I'm really grateful to say that I'm blessed with an incredible like family and friends that I feel connected to, and I feel like I can be myself around, and I just feel like excited to kind of do life with overall. Where if I think back to probably when I was like 25 and thinking about life overall, one of my goals from like 25 to like 35 was to really invest intentionally in a lot of time of like building my community and building the people like I want to do life with. And of course, like once I like, get to 35, like I'm 28 now, like it's not that I'm necessarily going to stop there, but it's like I'm just really being intentional. I think about this time in my life of saying, hey, like these are the friends that I'm going to spend my life with, and I want to be involved in their lives. I want to be present when they have kids, and I want them to be present when I have kids, and then same thing with my family. So yeah, that's what I'm kind of excited about.
That's
life
awesome,
now.
man. That's awesome. Have you always been connected in that way? Like, have you always craved that community? And yeah,
I would say I'm very blessed in the way that I was raised, that my grandfather, he really passed down like a strong family unit value to my dad and my mom, and the way they raised me is really spending a lot of like intentional quality time together as a family. And I think growing up, I didn't realize how lucky I was to like have that time with my family until like I like, you know, got out in the own world at my own of like, you know, 18, 21, and realized it's not like that for everyone. Or and by growing up with that value of like a really strong family and having the connection, like family really matters a lot to me. And then I think, like I was saying, like my grandfather really kind of like instilled the values of like family and hard work, that just from a very young age I remember him really being a mentor and positive role model in the way that he's like, hey man, like you're gonna learn a lot of things throughout this life, but like the two kind of like things that you'll always like see consistently learning, where it's like, dude, like the health of your family and like the quality time you're spending with your family and like loved ones, like is really kind of like all that matters, or all it like comes down to, like no matter what you achieve. And not to say like, you know, like you don't want to like work hard or like chase your career or anything like that as well too, but I just remember being a really young kid of just like even like 10 years old, and he's like, hey, like, you know, like do not get lost in like trying to like achieve a certain amount of like wealth or career.
He told you that at 10?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did he do? Is this mom's side, dad's side?
This is my dad's side. This is my dad's side. Okay. So he grew up in Alabama, and grew up with relatively like his mom's, my great grandma, was a widow. His dad passed away when he was 5, and then he just grew up a very like humble life, and then he worked to put himself through like medical school, and then he became a doctor and heart surgeon, and he studied and practiced at different clinics all and hospitals all around the U.S. Philadelphia. He worked at Yale, University of Illinois, and then he went out to Montana to start the program at the University of Montana. So I think just kind of like through all those experiences, like he was grateful that, you know, he kind of had also the, not like class typical, but he met my grandma, like his wife, when he was like 14.
Oh, wow.
And they developed a like relationship and built a life together ever since that. So I think like he really kind of like learned firsthand the value of like, hey, like, you know, like building a life together with someone that you love. And yes, working hard, but realizing at the end of the day, like he was most proud of the way that he raised his sons. And he was most proud that the way that he raised like my brother and I, like his grandchildren. And he was most proud of the way that, like, you know, he was like a great husband to my grandma. And work stuff just kind of like, you know, he was still proud that he like achieved a lot of stuff in medicine, but just the way he's like, hey, like I've seen a lot of guys throughout their careers think that the answer to life or the key to life was to, hey, when I get to this level of my career or surgeon, then I'm going to be happier, then I'm going to be fulfilled. But they realize that if along the way you don't maintain quality relationships with like the people you love or anything like that, like it's not as fulfilling as, you know, doing both of maintaining those quality relationships with the people you love, but also working hard in your career as well.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, it sounds like he was a solid man, you know, and it sounds like you guys were close. He was a solid mentor for you.
Yeah.
But, you know, what I took from that was sort of his main message was, it's not about that external validation. It's more about, it's not what you do, it's who you do it with. You know, we talked about it the other day. And so, like, tell me about how that has shown up in your life and how you have taken his message and sort of built your life around that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's actually kind of funny. I think I've also like made the mistake of like not listening, but I've made the mistake of like learning that lesson myself, where I am really grateful, like I said, to have had such positive male role models in my life, whether it's my grandfather, my dad, other male role models in my life, to really kind of pass on these lessons along the way. But I think to a certain extent, like just from our like nature as we're as humans, like we like think to ourselves like, oh, like, you know, like I hear this advice from someone who's like lived it or from someone who's seen it, but like I'm different, or like, you know, like I haven't like truly experienced it and like learned this myself. So I think from just different experiences in my life of growing up and in my like 20s and kind of like young career of like pro golf and everything like that, like realizing that like, hey, like no matter what I achieved, or if I won a tournament, or if I achieved this certain status or level or anything like that, like it always not necessarily felt empty, but it always didn't come close to the feeling or connection that I had like with like family. And realizing that, kind of like what you're saying, it's not necessarily what you do, it's like who you do it with. Like it's like along the way I've realized that it's a lot more fulfilling and a lot more fun when I'm surrounding myself with like quality people that like I love to like play golf with or love to work with, like if it's my coach or my caddy. Before I played pro golf, I worked in like tech sales and everything like that as well too. And no matter kind of like what I achieved, like I realized like, hey, like, you know, it was the mentors along the way that I really enjoyed working with, and just kind of like learning those lessons myself, of like hearing that advice, but not necessarily thinking I'm different, but just realizing in my own life, like, hey, like, you know, like I did achieve this kind of certain, like, you know, like achievement or status or wealth. But then like I realized that, oh, like there was a time in professional golf where I went kind of so deep into like really working hard, and that like I like not necessarily cut off like friends relationships, but I just didn't spend a lot of like quality time with you know, my friends and family as well too. And I got to such like a burned out point that even if like I did play well, or if I did like win a tournament or something like that, I was like what did I just like do this for? Like I didn't have anyone to celebrate it with. And
No,
I
but
didn't
you
even
still like there's still that element of you want to go out and you want to do exciting and ambitious things in the world. And so it's like, how do you balance that aspect of, you know, you're in a solo sport, you're a pro, you know, pro golfer. And so primarily, like you said, it's you, your caddy, your coach, and that's your core team. But it's like, how do you keep it front of mind to, you know, pursue your dreams and pursue, you know, a very high level of a sport while also maintaining these relationships outside of the sport? Like, how do you navigate that in your life?
Yeah, I think it notice, kind of like know myself and just kind of know what I've like learned so far. So I've been a pro golfer for about the past like 3-ish years, and my background's a tiny bit different also, where to be a pro golfer, it's actually not much of like a crazy process. Like obviously being an individual sport, you basically just declare yourself a professional and you don't compete in amateur tournaments anymore. So my background, it was a little bit different, where I didn't like grow up playing at all these like highly ranked like amateur tournaments. Like I still played a little bit of like competitive junior golf growing up, but I didn't go to like a college to play like Division I golf or anything like that. I went to University of Florida and played on the club team, and that was an incredible experience. But it, obviously, like I said, it wasn't like your classic, hey, you play at these top amateur ranked events, you play at this top collegiate golf team, and then you like, once you go from the top collegiate golf team, then you get like playing status on like a PGA tour or some world recognized tour. So I think kind of just like knowing like my background, like I had to figure out a lot on my own of like, okay, what does professional golf even look like for me? And kind of starting at like the true bottom, like level one of like, okay, like I just declare myself a professional and I have to build my own schedule, start entering all these tournaments, work with different coaches, and like along the way, I think you kind of just like learn to balance it out. But I've learned, knowing myself, that like I have a tendency to really take things to like the extreme of like when I first started professional golf, like I was saying, like I dove headfirst straight in and, you know, would spend, you know, the classic, you know, 8-10 hours a day working, practicing. And while that is like really important for you to kind of like grow and put the hours in, I took it to the extreme. And like I said, there was a point where it's like, hey, like I'm like pretty much like burnt out, and I'm only like 6 to 9 months in of like playing professional golf. Like I don't have like a social life. My sleep's not great. My stress is way too high. So along the way, I think just like taking a step back and knowing myself, I like have the tendency like to like take things to the extreme and like kind of like connect to what we were talking about earlier. I think it's also probably connected to kind of like having like a relatively like addictive like personality. I can get like really invested and like really involved in things, which is nice to an extent, but also knowing that along the way to give myself like rest is really important. That's something I've really learned over the past 1.5 and 2 years in pro golf, is like, I think just the way that I was like kind of like raised growing up, it was a relative like expectation of my family to like be like a high achiever, you know, really do well in school, do well in sports, invest in your community. And I love the way that I was raised, in a sense, because it taught me that I can always like strive to you know, be a man that, you know, really goes for all of his dreams and works hard and makes a positive impact on this planet. But I think I created a narrative for myself also, that if I didn't achieve or work hard enough, then like, you know, that at a certain sense, like I was like not necessarily a bad person, but it was just like I needed to do this to gain kind of like love and validation. So kind of learning along the way of understanding that narrative that I told myself that it wasn't a narrative that I want to keep telling myself but it's also not a true narrative at all.
When did that narrative first show up in your life? The
But
narrative that you need to achieve or perform, or you needed to always be, moving and doing something in order for you to feel value in your life.
yeah,
When
yeah,
did that first show up for you?
I would say I created that narrative for me when I was around like 11, 12, 13 years old. And it manifested in the way I was like, if I didn't achieve enough, like solid enough grades in school, then I wouldn't feel loved like at home by like my like family and friends, which wasn't true at all. Like my parents were incredibly like loving and supportive, but I think like kind of like in the back of my mind I told myself like, oh, like I wasn't like good enough if I didn't bring home like a C, or if I didn't bring home an A, and if I did bring home like a C or B, then like I wasn't good enough. And that I noticed over time I kind of like let that narrative manifest into all the different aspects of my life. Like if I was in relationships with girls or friends or family or something, like I would always like notice myself like striving and doing and feeling like I really had to like perform and achieve to earn like validation and love. So kind of getting back to like your overall like question of kind of like how to like navigate like that balance, like one, just like having the awareness to like understand that was just like narrative I created from like a young kid, that like I choose not to believe that narrative anymore, and knowing that like I no matter like my achievements, like I just inherently like have like worth in myself and self-love. And then also relating back to kind of like my faith, being like a Christian, and also just believing in like higher power and spirituality and everything like that. I believe that at the end of the day, like kind of like just like all those like external achievements and validation, again, is kind of like not what matters. Like what matters at the end of the day is like how I show up as a friend, and how I can love others, and how I can make a positive impact on this planet.
That's beautiful, man. So when in your life did you first recognize that pattern, that external validation, was an issue for you?
Yeah, it probably came when I was about like 22, 23 years old.
What happened?
I would say that no matter kind of like what I did or achieved, and this was also working in tech sales, no matter what I did, I just wouldn't feel like fulfilled, or wouldn't feel like good enough. And I would always like tell myself, I would hear this voice like in my head saying, like, hey, like, you did this, or you made this certain amount of money, or whatever the external achievement was. But like, so what? Like, like you could have like done this, or like I would just always notice this voice of saying like more, and it's not good enough. So I finally got kind of just like tired of like hearing that voice, and like I started to then just kind of like really, I think it's also started like a lot of like work at that point, like with like my therapist, of saying like, hey, like where does this voice come from? Where I've like started to notice it. And
so when did you? So from recognizing that voice, that narrative, running in the background, when did you decide to start therapy? Were you already in therapy? Did you decide to start therapy after that? And then what was the point in which, when you recognized that narrative was running, like what was the event that triggered change for you?
Yeah. So I've been in therapy ever since I started in therapy when I was a senior in college. And at the University of Florida, they had this program at the time through the Counseling and Wellness Resource Center that every student would get 5 free therapy and counseling sessions. And the kind of event that started therapy for me was I just broke up at that time with an ex-girlfriend that we dated for about a year and a half, 2 years, and I noticed a lot of patterns of how I would show up in a relationship that I wouldn't communicate in ways, and I wanted to kind of like learn how to like effectively communicate in a relationship. So therapy was kind of like my introduction to that, and then from there, of just those first 5 sessions, at the end, like the therapist and counselor kind of like would like just say like, hey, like it's been great that we've been able to like have these like 5 sessions, but I would really recommend like you continuing therapy at this point to kind of continue the growth and everything like that. And then since then I've just been consistently doing therapy once or twice a month for ever since I was relatively like 2021. And getting into therapy, it definitely took me time to, I think, to find kind of like the right therapist, for me, and one that I really felt safe to like communicate with. And I think the first experience in therapy, like I would work with like 2 or 3 therapists that would like in a way like try to tell me exactly what to do, but not in a way that would kind of like help me work through it. They would just be like, hey, like, you know, I'm hearing this and that. Okay, you have to do like this and that. And I was like,
give you like a diagnosis or a prescription or something like that.
Exactly. It would come
sort
off
of removes
like,
your agency in that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It would come off in like a very one set minded way of like approaching the issue or solution or anything like that. And and like just not knowing much about it, I was like, I don't think that's necessarily how it works, but it's like I just like don't respond well to like kind of like only one perspective. Like I think kind of like finding my therapist I do work with now, like I'm really grateful that we work together in a context of like kind of, you know, like me like being able to like, you know, share kind of like what I'm like going through and like want to talk about and everything like that. But then like, you know, she helps me kind of like reframe it in a perspective that I think is just very like beautiful and healthy, and not necessarily kind of, you know, hey, like you have to think about it in this certain way. She's just kind of like open to be like, okay, like, you know, like this is what I'm hearing, and she like along the way gives me like tools to kind of like help me reframe it, but she doesn't necessarily direct me into like one rabbit hole. So anyway, all that to say, like that's kind of a little bit about my therapy, my journey in therapy. But to answer the second part of your question is, I think it was not necessarily like a specific event. I think looking back at kind of like what's been like big like catalyst and change in my life is I've hit like rock bottom in different ways of just really feeling like low, or and then wanting a change of like it kind of like hitting rock bottom in the sense of just like if I achieved a certain thing or if I failed, then I would notice this kind of like I said, the voice of just like, hey, like you're not good enough, you're not, and I just wanted to change that voice, and I wanted to address where that kind of narrative came from. So I think it was just more of that, where I finally made a decision to be like, hey, like where does this voice come from, like, and stop kind of like just gain a lot more like awareness and stop kind of like judging myself, because I think I would like, you know, just run my head into a wall so many times of going through the pattern of like hearing this voice of you're not good enough or it isn't enough, and then me trying to like silence the voice or push it down and be like, you'd be like, oh, come on, man, like, you know, like why are you thinking that way or something like that. But I would just be stuck in this like kind of like constant feedback loop of like the voice coming up, me trying to push it away, and it would like never go away, or it would just get like louder or stronger. And I was like, okay, like I'm tired of like kind of like living this way, and like I want to have more like awareness and get to a point in life of saying, you know, hey, like it's okay for like kind of like, obviously like we all have different kind of like perspectives and voices that doesn't, but I think it was a big breakthrough for me like in therapy at the time to like realize just, hey, like let your thoughts just be thoughts. My therapist.
How did you, so you talked about awareness there, and you talked about hearing that voice and trying to push it aside and kind of hide from it a little bit.
Yeah.
So when you talk about awareness and building that muscle for, I call it a muscle for self-inquiry, basically, like what was that process like to allowing yourself to listen to that voice more fully, more clearly, more deeply? Like how did you go about actually paying attention to that voice and what it was saying?
Yeah, it started with a lot of meditation, of truly just being able to like meditate and sit with myself.
Any specific type of meditation that you started with or ended with, or what do you
It
like?
wasn't necessarily specific. It was honestly the classic kind of like, you know, 10 minutes of like YouTube meditation, or using any app like Calm or Headspace or anything like that. Really just kind of like dipping my toes in those waters. And then I would say through therapy as well too, of my therapist kind of just giving the overall like analogy that really helped reframe it. Was like, you know, like, you know, kind of like your thoughts can be viewed as like just clouds passing by. So it's just, you know, you put yourself in this perspective, like you're just in
You're
this
the
kind
sky,
of like,
and your emotions and your thoughts are the clouds.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Where, you know, you can completely observe these clouds, and you know, you're in a field, and like, you know, some of the clouds might hang around, and some of the clouds might just completely pass by, and whatever they do, just let them be clouds. Whether they want to be dark clouds, whether they want to be light clouds, you can just kind of like have that beautiful awareness and perspective and be like, oh, like I see that cloud, I don't have to stay under that cloud. I don't have to follow that cloud. I don't have to do anything but just let that cloud be a cloud. And I think that was a really beautiful way of helping me put in perspective kind of a lot of those thoughts. And then also just
which emotions or what, I suppose, what thoughts and what were your biggest clouds? What would you see the most of when you were doing this practice?
I would see clouds of self-doubt. I would see clouds of anxiety. I would see clouds of always like looking for like a solution. And then clouds of just like really feeling like just like that, like I wasn't enough. So I noticed a lot of like those clouds at the first time of kind of like wanting to like make that change and really start to rewire. Thank you, bro. Different narratives.
Cool, man. So you started your meditation practice. You're listening. You're seeing these clouds go by. Okay. When you see these clouds of self-doubt, of anxiety, what do you do with them? You just let them pass by. But how does that practice of meditation help you to move through those feelings? And what impact has it had on your life since starting that practice?
Yeah, I think meditation really teaches you the value of like I like how you referred to it as like building the strength and muscle of awareness, where meditation really teaches you to simply just be aware and be exactly present, exactly as you are, whether through its different types of meditation. I'd also be curious, so like you have a meditation practice as well. I'd also love to hear about yours and the different ways of meditation that have impacted your life as well. But just to kind of answer your question, is like meditation really helped me build that muscle of awareness. And from there, once I would have that awareness, it would allow me to detach and no longer assign like emotions or assign identity or ego to those different thoughts or different clouds. And then from there, once I would do that, again, it would simply be having the perspective of like, okay, like those clouds and thoughts were assigned to a certain like emotion or experience or perspective, and then it would allow me to reflect on that experience perspective and be like, okay, like when did I first learn that? And that would, I think, lead me to like more of like a journaling and reflection time of like, okay, once I meditate and see all these clouds and thoughts and perspectives, then I would journal and be like, okay, like, where do I think these come from? Or, like just kind of like, I think also like as you build that muscle of awareness, it really helps to be just like overall like curious and non-judgmental of just being like, hey, like, oh, like that is a cloud of like self-doubt. Like, okay, like what does that cloud look like? Like what's that thought look like? How does that show up?
That one's huge. I mean, that one, what you're talking about is grace, effectively, right? And having grace for yourself. That one, I think, that's one that I've struggled with personally. But I know a lot of other people struggle with that as well, of like sitting there and thinking about your thoughts and watching your emotions pass by is one thing. Not judging them is an entirely different skill, dude. It's an entirely different skill. Dude. And so how, for you, like, did that come easy for you, or did you have to build that level of grace for yourself? Like, how did you find that grace for yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it didn't come easy to me. And it honestly, I mean, like I'm 20 now. It took me like probably like 26 years or like 27 years of living on this planet to find that grace for myself. And what really helped me is, again, like reframing it with a kind of the perspective of, like I'm really grateful to have incredible friends in my life that show me a lot of like grace and love and patience. But I realized I wasn't showing myself that grace and that love and patience. So I finally got to a point in life similar to kind of just being like tired of like, I would show up for my friends in certain ways where I would like the things I would say to myself, I would never say to like one of my friends. And it's, the classic tried and true of advice that we've all heard in different kind of aspects of therapy or anything where it's like, hey, like the things you say to yourself, like, would you ever say that to a friend? And it's like, no, like, okay, so why do you say that to me? So it, as much as it's classic tried and true advice, it still took me a long time to like really implement it in my life. And similarly, I got to a point where I was like, okay, like, I'm tired, honestly, of just like still treating myself in this way. Like I'm gonna make a conscious decision to be like, okay, like whenever these thoughts come by, like, you know, again, I think it just takes like more like looking at it as kind of like a way of like muscle building and reps. It's like, okay, it's a rep for me to, one, just like observe the thought,
Yeah.
and then two, I get another rep in of just being like non-judgmentally curious, and then three, I get another rep in of like consciously like rewiring that thought pattern and saying like, okay, like I deserve grace, I deserve love, I deserve patience. Like my best friends in life, my family, my mom, my dad, would never say those things to me. Like I'm going to choose to stop saying things to myself, and I think you actually have to make that conscious decision.
For
where,
sure.
you know, it sounds relatively intuitive. I don't think a lot of people have made the conscious decision to like.
Well, that's
actually,
intentional. I mean, that's where the intention show up for yourself, is like, that's how you implement these changes, is again, just recognizing this stuff is wonderful and it's great for a start. But unless you start with the implementation and the integration of what you're actually learning and trying to do, like, it's kind of all just mental masturbation, you know? It's like you're just kind of sitting. And so, yeah, like you have to practice grace. And then once you practice grace, you have to be like, okay, well, how can I make sure that I'm getting better at this, right? And but also having grace in that process too, you know? And it's like not trying to whip yourself into it, but it's genuinely for like, okay, no, I want to practice grace. How do I remind myself to practice grace? How do I treat myself like I'm a friend that I'm in charge of their well-being effectively? And so, yeah, that's great.
I would love to hear more about you shared, bro. That's like finding grace for yourself was something that was like difficult. I'd love to hear about like your perspective and how that came to be for you.
Yeah, that's been a really, really tough one for me. I had pretty low self-esteem for a long time, and meditation, honestly, and learning, like podcasts and books and, you know, all those things, it really opened up my eyes as to like what this life could look like. And I didn't have a lot of positive role models in my life, and so I found them through various forms of media, and is what it is, right? But I also recognized that it was my mindset, my self-esteem was what was holding me back in life, and that was the bottleneck. And so, through meditation, similar thing. So the way I meditate is a little bit different. I do the thought recognition and the emotion recognition. I do that as well. However, I really try to get to a point of stillness and like complete silence.
Cool.
So I try to turn off all my thoughts. I don't want.
Interesting.
And like that for me is what true meditation is for me.
Okay.
Is like complete and total silence in my brain. So the monkey brain, right? The monkey mind.
Yep.
It's trying to control that and get back to, okay, yes, I had this thought. I'm aware of it. I see it. There it goes. It's self-judgment. It's doubt. It's, you know, I need to fold the clothes tomorrow.
Exactly,
it's, you know, anything from benign to whatever. So, but it's ultimately saying, okay, I saw it. It's okay. Let's come back to the present moment.
Yeah.
And ultimately that's what it is my meditation is focused around the present moment. And I have a mantra that I say to bring me into the present moment, which is I'm here, I am now, I am me, and I am enough.
Love that, bro.
And then I go through each one of those things, and I try to feel it, I try to embody it, and each one has a different thing for me, sentiment for me. But yeah, that's what my meditative practice is, and it's been profound in my life. I love that, dude. You know, so
dude, thank you for sharing that mantra too as well too. Like I'm gonna carry that mantra going forward as well too. Where exactly what you're talking about, just like meditation at its like truest form, and it can be done in so many different ways. Where I even find myself like meditating like on the golf course through playing golf. It's truly about being just present where your feet are in that present moment, and like the more you can do that, and the more that you find just that silence and peace in the present moment, the more you realize you're like, oh, like life is just made of one present moment after another present moment after another present moment, and you know, it can get so easy to like be lost in like the monkey mind, like you're saying, like, oh, like I have to do this, or like I have to go work towards this, or set all these future goals, or even think about things in the past, like, oh, like why did I say that, or anything like that. But the more perspective you can have about just being in the present moment, you're like, oh, like life's just a collection of moments, and it's one after the other. And I found that the more I'm present, the more I enjoy life, experience life to the fullest. And I think it's just also been a pretty big perspective change over the last like year and a half to be truly like open to like every experience and detach from a lot of the outcome and let a lot of like my ego go. Where when you're truly present in the moment, you're not identifying with different emotions, you're not thinking about different outcomes, you're not really kind of like worried about like, oh, like, like, do I have to do this, or how do people view me in this way? It's you're more like say like, I am in this present moment, I am here, I am me, I am enough. So
yeah, man. How do you, when you catch yourself not living in the present moment, what does that feel like for you?
Yeah, it feels, I noticed, so there's this book that I also recently started reading. It's called The Secret Language of the Body. Have you read it?
No.
It basically, the kind of overall premise is how our body has a way of communicating with us that we don't learn from a young age of how to kind of like understand, where, if a certain tightness shows up in your leg, or if a certain shortness of breath shows up, that is your body communicating like, hey, like something is off. And anyway, all that to say, like, what it feels like for me is I've started to like really like get in tune more with my body and learn that like when I'm not in the present moment, my breath is relatively like short, fast pace. I notice a lot of kind of like tense energy in my stomach. And then also I notice a tendency to speed up a lot of like my speech and thoughts and action, where it's kind of like my monkey mind's going at a million miles an hour. I'm trying to figure out like, oh, like, do I do this next? Do I do that next? Do I do this next? And then I realize like, oh, like I am trying to figure out and work through so many different possibilities or outcomes that I'm not here in the present moment, and I'm not fully observing, hey, like I'm here like with like my friend Ryan, or I'm not here just like taking this like whole experience. So for me, just one, again, having kind of like that awareness to take like a step back, and then like, okay, like I feel it now in my body, of, oh, like I feel that tightness kind of going around like in my stomach. I feel my breath kind of being like short and fast paced.
So connecting with the body.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious about this because this is a skill that I'm trying to actively build. I don't connect with my body very well.
Okay.
And so they call that somatics, you know? And so what is your process for, do you have a process for connecting with your body, listening to your body, and making that connection for yourself? Because I'm sure that it shows up in your sport.
Yep.
And so tell me more about that.
Yeah, I'm also in the process of like kind of like learning about it so much more as well too, and figuring out how that looks like for my life. But for me, something like I've started like reading this book and also learning a lot more about like somatics as well, where I'm just kind of at the start of the process of learning. But for me in my sport, and how it looks like is just really connecting to a lot of my breath. I find really is very effective, where when I start to notice it, I then just immediately just kind of like, just take a step back and I just immediately focus on my breath of taking a big inhale in for a 4 count, similar to like box breathing or different breathwork. Inhale in for a 4 count, either hold for 2 or hold for another 4 count, and then exhale for 6, exhale for 8, just relatively within the world of box breathing. So that's been big for me to like reconnect. And then it shows up in my sport where this has actually been a big period of growth in the last 6 months, whereas I've been developing my professional career. So the way it works in pro golf is there's kind of like 2 relative levels of pro golf. There's one where you're a full-time professional, but you're playing on mini tours. And what mini tours are the level below the 3 international like world tours and their affiliates. So that's either like the PGA Tour and its affiliates, where it's like Korn Ferry Tour, PGA Americas. There's the DP World Tour, which is more just, it's known as also the European Tour, and its affiliates called the Hotel Planner Tour. And then there's the Asian Tour, and they all give you international official world golf ranking points. But if you don't play consistently on any of those tours, then you play on what's called like mini tours. So anyway, all that to just kind of explain and give context, where I've been playing a lot on like the mini tour level, and I've been working to make the jump up to all of these official world golf ranking tours. And as I've gone in different opportunities for qualifying, whether it's Q school, I've noticed myself get really just kind of like anxious and nervous about playing at higher levels. And the way that shows up in my body is really, again, like I said, like shortness of kind of like breath or fast-paced breathing, quickness of action. So I'll really like rush really fast to the golf ball, or I'll speed up my process, or I'll swing it like a little bit like faster, and then I'll notice I hold more tension in my body too. I'm really gripping the golf club, kind of like really like tight, like trying not to like make a mistake or anything like that. So having that awareness over the last 6 months to understand like, hey, like I think it's also done a lot of work in with my sports psychologist of reframing all of that, where it's like I used to view it as like nerves, but now I view it as excitement and opportunity. Where again, like, you know, from being kind of in the world of podcasts and like self-help, you kind of hear a lot of people talk about your body doesn't know the difference between like nervousness and excitement. It's only your mind that tells you the difference. So by reframing it, that's something I've been really intentional about over the past 6 months. Of every time I start to feel that like pressure, or if I have to, you know, like a 4-foot putt to like, you know, make a certain cut or make a certain amount of money or whatever the external outcome is, I start to feel that pressure within my body. But I've really started to kind of, again, like stop trying to push it away, because I think that was my initial response, was be like, okay, like, oh man, I'm nervous, like, okay, like let me just get through this, or just like let me like try to like push it away. So being aware of that and stop trying to push away and like really lean more into it and tell my mind like, okay, like, oh, like I'm nervous, like, oh, this is awesome. And like I start to feel alive, and I start to like create a new narrative in my head of like, oh, like this is what I work so hard for. Like honestly, you know, kind of talking about like golf, I think of one of the reasons a lot of people play golf is because, yeah, it is like addictive, because you get such a dopamine hit from like hitting a really good golf shot. Man, when it's like, have you played golf a little bit or so? It's like everyone, I think it's a cool sport because everyone can relate to kind of like relative, like hitting that one really good shot where like no matter what level of it, bro, you've hit a great like drive or shot off the tee.
The most frustrating thing about the sport is because like you'll step on the tee box and smack the shit out of it, and then the next time you're on the tee box, you freaking shank it, and that's why it frustrates the hell out of me. But,
exactly. No, beautifully said. And just talking about golf, like kind of like my whole point with that was like is like I realized like I started reframing. It was like, oh, like, you know, instead of thinking of like, oh, like don't mess up, or like don't let the nerves get to you, or don't do this, don't do that, I started reframing. I was like, hey, like, oh, this is my opportunity to hit a really good shot. Like, and I love like hitting like a really good shot or anything like that. So really reframing it.
What came up for me there for that reframing is I think it's an amazing reframing. I mean, shifting from, you know, anxiety to excitement is huge. And so thank you for unpacking that. But also for me, it couple of things. One was coming into the present moment, and also recognizing, you kind of touched on it there, was like, this is why I'm here. This is what I'm doing here.
Yeah, it's why I practice so much. It's like legitimately, I you know, like anyone at a professional level or anyone that like works really hard at something to do, I put a lot of hours into like hitting a golf ball in a certain way. Like it's because I realize like I want to be now in those moments of when I'm standing on the 18th tee and I need to make birdie to like go win or go make a cut or anything like that. It's like, it's why I do it. Like it's to me, like I've completely reframed it. It's like, hey, like I put in all this work so I can get into those really high pressure situations. And then I think it's also like reframing where before I would tell myself like, oh, like a narrative that was just completely untrue. It's like in those high pressure situations, like, oh, like I fold under that pressure, or like, oh, like I don't do well under pressure. Like I think when you do succeed in those high pressure moments, it's not necessarily like letting it kind of get to your head in a egotistical, inflating way, but it's then I've reframed it in a way of thinking of like, oh, like when a lot of pressure does come around, like, hey, like I have hit a good shot before and I can't see, and it teaches your brain like, oh, like I can't do hard things, and it's cool, and it's cool to like do hard things. So I think just kind of like I've helped myself like reframe it in that way, where instead of like, you know, like telling myself like, oh, like, you know, like I don't do well or anything like that, it's more just like, hey, like I've completely detached from the outcome, and all I've realized is I can control my process, and so like get back to the present moment of like, okay, like my process is I take a deep breath and then I really get in touch with my body, like, okay, like do I notice like a little bit more tension like in my right arm, or do I notice that like, I have more adrenaline? And then once I notice that, I'm like, okay, how can I use that adrenaline? Because adrenaline certainly can be used for your benefit in golf, where it's like, okay, I'm actually now swinging the club like a little bit faster. I can hit the ball further. Okay, that's great. But you have to learn how to kind of like control that and adapt to that. And then also just a big part, I think that was just like of letting go of outcome, where it's like, hey, like there's only a certain amount of things in my control, where it's my process, my preparation, and my attitude. And I know that I've prepared. I know that my process is solid. It feels authentic to me, and it gives me the best chance of success. And then also just letting everything else go, where golf is such a game of like just random outcomes, where it's like, dude, like I'm trying to hit a golf ball like hundreds of yards in the air, trying to fly it through the wind that I can't control at all, land it on a certain like uneven playing surface with grass growing different ways, just to get it all in like a tiny like hole. And I was like, a lot of that's out of my control. So I was like, all I can do is just like get back into my body, focus on my process.
That's amazing.
And hit like the best shot I can, and like the rest is like, all right, like. And I think again, I've kind of like learned more to be like love the process and focus more on that, where it's like I get more excitement and addiction like focusing more on that instead of like attaching to like that outcome and shot, where it's like, oh, like I did whatever I could in my control, and that's what I had fun doing. That's why I love the game. That's why I play the game. I don't play the game for outcomes or results or anything like that, because at the end of the day, that's all also just like fleeting. And
Yeah, I mean, doing it for the love of the game, right?
Exactly.
But also, yeah, so a couple of things came up for me there, like, as I process all this through my lens. Like, I've played golf. I started golf when I was 18, so I've been playing for a long time. Recreationally, right? And I'm not good at all, but I've been playing for a while. But I've never been that intentional with golf. I've always just kind of come out, and for me, it was about the connection with whoever I was golfing with.
For sure.
Because I rarely golf alone.
Yeah.
And so it's always with somebody. So that was that. But, from what you talked about there, which triggered one of my frameworks that I think through. One is there's a business guy that I follow, Alex Hormozy. Have you seen his stuff?
Yeah,
Okay.
Hormozy, yeah.
So one of his big things is, when you're having those feelings of self-doubt, of anxiety, of performance anxiety, whatever it is, you should be able to look back at your life and see an undeniable stack of proof that you are who you say you are.
Yes.
And that's what you're talking about, which is like, okay, I've prepared for this. I've trained for this. I've done hard things before. I've been in intense situations before, and I'm fine. And I've done well. Exactly. And I've knocked it out of the park, whatever. Exactly. And so it's, allowing yourself to think and feel that and embody that sense of confidence that comes from, your lived experience of having done all those things before, is huge. And it's a big thing that's helped me in my life as well. And another thing that you triggered there from my lens and my standpoint is, as I move forward through my life, and like meditation really brought this into a light for me, which is when I approach new situations or intense situations, I try to lead with a level of intention rather than expectation.
Okay.
And so what triggered that for me was like you were talking about, oh, what's the purse going to be? How many shots do I have to be, and like living in the future. Those are expectations of like, if I do this, then I will get this.
Yep.
And so, but when you switch, but as you mentioned, like there's so many unknowns and things that you can't control. And so you're hedging your bets on something that's like largely out of your control.
Exactly.
However, what is in your control is, like you said, your process, your process,
your preparation, and your attitude.
Process, preparation, and attitude.
Yep.
Right. So for me, I frame that as that's my intention.
Exactly.
And so if I show up in a way and it's like, okay, I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't know if I'm going to win. I don't know if this person's going to like me. I don't know, whatever it is. But if I show up, well slept, in a good mood, practicing my core values and like living with curiosity and everything, it's like there's a higher than likely chance that this is going to go well, And if it doesn't, okay, so what? I still showed up the way that I wanted to show up. Exactly. And so great. But, if not, then it is what it is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's great, man. has the game of golf, I don't know how to ask this question. I'm curious, sort of chicken or the egg scenario here. In terms of this mindset for you and this shift, was it the game of golf that has helped you sort of connect with your body more deeply, or was it more, did you have that intention in that practice before going into golf and it has helped you in golf? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It's a beautifully worded question. I would say it was the game of golf has helped me more.
Okay.
Where through my different experiences in the game of golf, it's really led me down kind of the path of really being intentional about connecting to my body more, and adopting different mindsets as well. That I think there's like a kind of whether it's golf or different hobbies or passions or sports and things like that, like they really do imitate life in so many ways. Where the experience I've had in golf, like you can just really kind of tie it to so many experiences you'll have in life. So just by playing the game of golf professionally at the highest level, it's more kind of led me down this path of really being intentional about connecting with my body, and having these different mindsets that I both apply in golf, but then also I realized I apply these mindsets like in my daily life to life with relationships or any other part of my life.
That's cool.
I'd be curious because you're a fantastic listener as well too. So the way that like you're like processing this is like you shared that from Hormozy's perspective of approaching different like high pressure situations like that, like you should be able to kind of like say to yourself, hey, I have this undeniable stack of proof that I am who I say I am, and I do hard things as well too. And that gives you the inner like confidence, kind of like you sharing like pretty vulnerably like growing up with low self-esteem, that I can relate to as well too. Like I've realized that over time that confidence has been like a pretty like relatively like tough thing for me to develop. I'd be curious like your thoughts on like kind of like your perspective and framework and process of like developing that like stack of undeniable proof, but then two, like that inner confidence that undeniable stack of proof, like does that inner confidence come from that undeniable stack of proof, or where does that confidence kind of like build from?
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, confidence is a tough one, dude. It's something that I really struggle with.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
And the building looking back and seeing an undeniable stack of proof that I am who I say I am, starts with I have to know who I am.
Yeah.
And it starts with who am I saying that I am, right? And so the first trigger for that was, who am I?
Yeah.
What do I stand for? What are my core values? How do I want to show up in the world? And so I went through an arduous process of like really identifying that and being very intentional with, what are my core values? And literally going through them and then defining them.
Love it.
And it's like, not just like you pick a word out of the air and it's like, oh, this seems cool, but it's like, why?
Yeah. Why?
And continuing to ask myself, why? Why is this my core value?
Yeah.
One of my core values.
Why? What does that value even mean to me?
Exactly. And so it started with that, and then it was like, okay, these are my core values. This is how I want to show up in the world. Have I shown up in the world before like this? Yeah. When have I done this? And so my core values, discipline, integrity, curiosity, and strength.
Cool.
Are my core values. And it's like, okay, when have I practiced discipline? When have I practiced integrity? When have I been curious? When have I been strong? And my background was I was a first responder for a long time. And so, I got to show up in those ways regularly on the job, but as well as, for friends and in my personal life. Of course, I failed at a lot of things. And, there were a lot of times when I didn't practice discipline and I didn't do all those things. But largely, I was practicing those things. Exactly. And so now putting it through that framework of, as I try new things, what helps me have confidence is putting it through that framework of, okay, I want to start podcasting, right? How can I be a podcaster while also practicing my core values?
Yeah.
And so it's like, how can I do this with this one? And so, what's helped me build the confidence moving forward to be like, okay, I can do this as long as I do it. That is true. I do it in a way that is true to myself, and I do it in a way that is true to my core values, and I move forward in the life, and I move forward with it through that lens,
Yeah.
basically. And so that's helped me navigate confidence in my low self-esteem, and
Cool.
and it's just being very intentional about how I show up in the world.
Yeah.
How about you?
I appreciate you sharing, bro.
Yeah, man.
A little bit similar, where I think, you know, just for some reason or another, like, I don't think a lot of people really have taken the time to sit down and even like answer the question, like, who am I? Like, have I like thought about it? Like, you know, like, who is JP? So similar, of like, hey, like, you know, like, how do I like identify like myself, or just, you know, like, taking the time to sit down and think and journal and meditate and reflect. And similar, define a lot of like my core values. I think it connects a lot to like my like faith and being a Christian as well too. That just knowing, like, kind of like having the confidence that, like, you know, a lot of like just kind of like when you believe like in a higher power like God, that you have to truly like accept and believe, saying, hey, like, a lot of my life honestly like necessarily like isn't like in my control. Like, it's like he's already like as a Christian, you believe that, like, hey, like God has a plan for me, and whatever it is, I might not know it until I just know his plan's great. I know he's good. I know he's loving, and that's kind of the core, the corner of the base. So I think relying a lot on that has actually like helped in a way of just like not like saying that, you know, hey, like, I'm not going to take agency, or it's not me saying I'm not going to take agency, or me saying I'm not going to like intentionally like live my life. It's more saying like, hey, like, you know, I am going to really think about like kind of like who I am and what that means and how I want to show up each and every day. And like, as a Christian, to me, that means of like just really like kind of like, you know, being a good human and making a positive impact on this planet, where like if you like kind of read the Bible and I mean, like that, like a lot of like the lessons in it are just like, you know, like, hey, like, love your neighbor and be a good human and everything like that.
What
so
does when you say be a good human, like, what does that mean to you?
yeah, to me, that means that I have a certain kind of like skills and abilities, and my purpose through those skills and abilities are to make a positive impact on this planet. So being a good human means that you or just make a positive impact on this planet, whether that's through your work, through your relationships, anything like that. And then kind of just going back to some of the, like, just like I've done a lot of like the inner work of saying that, you know, hey, like, who is JP and what are my core values as well too. So me, like, my core values are service, fun, discipline, and integrity as well too, where just from the way I was like raised, and then also just like I said, something to like my faith, where it's like that service component like plays first and foremost of like kind of being human. It was like, hey, I believe I was put on this planet to be of service to others, and that's the way that I want to show up in my golfing career, where no matter what I achieve in my career, whether I get full status on PGA Tour or European Tour or win a certain tournament, like my overall goal in golf is to make a positive difference in the world of mental health, and whatever platform I have in the world of professional golf, similar to kind of like what we were talking about yesterday. You know, there's that UFC fighter like Paddy Pimblett, where, you know, he's been at some of the highest levels in his like fighting career, but he ends like his interviews talking about one of his mates that just like committed suicide, and he is on this national platform saying, you know, hey, like, I would rather you call me at 2 a.m. crying into the phone than me having to go to your funeral and cry over your casket. So showing up in that way in professional golf, that knowing that whatever I do on the golf course is kind of peanuts compared to the impact I could make outside of it. So already with like tournaments that I've played in, like if I make a certain amount of money, then already a percentage of those proceeds are donated to a certain mental health organization or charity, partnering along the way with different mental health organizations or charities to do fundraisers. Part of also me playing professional golf is you know, I'm not sure if you're kind of like aware of like, obviously, you know, like the YouTube space, but there's this thing called like YouTube golf that's like really growing in a massive part of kind of like the golf entertainment, where it's just people kind of filming different golf matches or anything like that, and my way of doing that is playing against other professionals and filming it, and whoever wins, a certain amount of money is donated to either that professional's playing career or that professional's charity of their choosing.
Cool.
So when I win, that certain amount of money is donated to like a mental health organization.
Which organization?
So I've donated to Heads Up guys before, which they're based out of Chicago, but just different mental health organizations. Well, too, I've done work with. There's a local organization here in Austin called the Sims Foundation, where they provide mental health resources to a lot of the music community here in Austin. Where obviously Austin being such a great scene for like live music and everything. If you're involved in the music community in any aspect, whether that you could be like a manager, stage producer, musician, anything like that. Along the way, if you need mental health resources, Sims will partner with you to kind of provide those.
I'll put it in the show notes and all that.
I appreciate you, bro.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
But anyway, all that to say, like that's part of like why like I believe I was put on this planet to be like of service. And then similar to kind of other core values of just like fun, where just like, dude, like I think it's also related to kind of like my mindset of like thinking of like the vastness of life and the vastness of like our universe, where it's like not to take things too seriously, because also like we're on this planet for like such a, like if you look at the overall period of time, like dude, we're on this planet for like such a small like grain of sand, exactly. That's like, why would I take anything too seriously? You know what I mean? Like, let's have fun, let's be good people, go after things you enjoy, man. Like I like you also think about like we're also kind of like humans are to our knowledge like some of the only known species that like have like pleasure and fun and enjoyment and consciousness and everything like that. So
it's similar. It's not one of my core values, I would say, but one of the like my staples in life is play.
Yes,
and it's
dude.
like finding play in anything that you do.
I love it.
That's what it's about.
I love it. And yeah, and kind of just overall to like back to like our original like talk about just like knowing myself and knowing who I am, like waking up intentionally each and every day to like remind myself, and then also just like train my brain to look for ways of that undeniable stack of proof to like be like, hey, like I am who I say I am, and because like I show up for my friends in this way that like I'm a good human and I love them and everything like that. So it helps build confidence, but it took me like a long time, or you know, or just like, you know, a lot of my life probably from like 10 to like 23, I wasn't living with like a lot of confidence or self-esteem or anything like that, and it's really been an intention over the past like 4 or 5 years to.
When did you find your purpose and this mission for, you know, mental health, and when did you find that? Yeah,
it's not necessarily, but ever since I kind of like around like 16, 18 years old, like I just like had this really strong belief that was like, hey, like there's like more to like me being on this planet than just like doing things for like myself, or just like I really firmly believe that the reason I'm put on this planet is to like do things for others. So I think it's always kind of been rooted in that search. But then more personally, when I was like 19, 20 years old, just starting to like go through it, and then like I really started to experience a lot of like anxiety and depression for the first time, for different reasons, of whether it was me kind of like moving away from family, me starting to like, you know, really just like, you know, grow and mature as like a person, or just also just like I think be like, you know, like living the typical kind of like college lifestyle of just like drinking a lot and partying as well too. Like I started to experience like depression, or just like, you know, a lot of this stuff. So just by going through that, and knowing that, hey, you know, like, hey, like I've experienced like anxiety, depression, like suicidal thoughts, like kind of a relatively like you know, not whole range of the spectrum, but just like those are kind of the things I experienced with my mental health. Knowing that like, hey, like I'm not alone in that I experienced that, and going back to kind of like just like, hey, if I'm not alone, then I want to be the type of person that shares about my experiences, because I think, you know, a lot of people, I think it's one of the beautiful parts about humanity, human connection, is knowing that, you know, hey, like if you think that like, you know, whatever you're going through is kind of like unique to you, or not, like I don't mean to burst your bubble, it's probably not, like, you know, like probably someone
you're
like,
unique, but you're not special.
Exactly beautifully said. I like the way you said that. So just me like over the years just like really like challenging myself to kind of be like, hey, like, you know, like I want to be vocal about my like experiences, because I think like, you know, we have made a lot of progress in terms of like society, in terms of like mental health, about talking about it more, finding more like resources for it, but we still have kind of like a lot of work to do in terms of like, you know, like, hey man, like the things that I struggle with anxiety or depression as well too, like I think those things are just something that like a lot of people don't necessarily talk about, or like if you were to truly like, you know, go in the street and meet 10 new people as well too and ask them like how they're doing, they would probably give the classic answers like, oh, like solid man, or just, you know, the classic, like, living the dream, or just another day. But, like, you ask him, like, you truly ask him, like, hey, man, like, how are you actually doing? They'd be like, oh, dude, like, I'm really feeling this way, or I'm really feeling alone, or I'm struggling with this. And just knowing overall, it's like, hey, like, I can be someone that can talk about my experiences openly and freely, because that will hopefully inspire someone else to be like, hey, like, okay, like, you know, like, I see this dude, like, he's experiencing the same kind of thing as me, like, oh, and he went to this resource to get this kind of help, like, that might help for me. So in my mind, like, it's like, if I've really done, like, my job and my purpose when I'm sharing my experiences, and if it inspires one person to go talk to someone else, even if it's just a friend, and be like, hey, man, like, can I talk to you about this? And like, I think it really just helps lighten that kind of, like, mental load. So that's kind of, like, what I've, like, felt, like, inspired to do ever since I was, like, 19 or 20.
That's incredible, because I mean, what you're talking about is vulnerability, right? And it's like opening yourself up to the world, to feel, to experience, to express. I'm apprehensive to call it weakness, because it's not weakness, right?
Yeah.
But it has been perceived as weakness for a really long time.
Exactly.
And so it's the destigmatization of vulnerability, is effectively what you're talking about. And so it's like, how did you get comfortable being vulnerable with other people? Because you've been quite vulnerable with me, you know, and I appreciate it immensely. But what was the mechanism for you in your life where you recognized that, like, hey, there's power in this, there's actually strength in being vulnerable with other people?
Yeah. So I appreciate you sharing your stuff and being vulnerable with me too, bro. I would say I'm really grateful to be raised by my mom in a way that I think she kind of taught me from a pretty young age. And then also my dad, where it's like, it's okay to be vulnerable, where I think a lot of guys don't see, like, their dads, like, cry. And I saw my dad kind of, like, cry, like, or like when my grandmother died or something like that, where it's like, I think a lot of guys would, like, feel that they would have to, like, hold emotions back. But, like, just seeing my dad, like, not having to hold those emotions back. And then also similar, like, my mom's, like, kind of like taught me ways, like, hey, like, you know, like, do you, like, get your strength through, like, communication and being open. So I'm very grateful I was, like, raised in that way. But then also I think it's just also from a, you know, innate desire to have human connection, where I realized from a young age, is like, okay, like, the more that I can be, like, vulnerable and share, you know, these vulnerable parts of myself, then actually people will share that back with me, and I can have that awesome connection. I can have that amazing, it's like, oh, dude, like, you know, like, I appreciate you sharing, and it's helped me form some of the best relationships of just, like, me, like, meeting friends, and kind of right off the bat, you know, we're being vulnerable and open, and not necessarily kind of, like, presenting, like, masks to each other or something like that, and realizing it's like, hey, like, you know, okay, like, so just that human connection is what I, like, crave and desire, and realizing that's like, hey, like, okay, you have to be vulnerable and open yourself up and be willing to share all of truly who you are with others, if you want to receive that authentic love and support back, and do the same for others.
Yeah. So leading by example, effectively, of like, hey, if I'm open and I'm willing to show myself, then maybe that will invite somebody to do the same.
Exactly.
And then we can truly connect on a deeper, more intimate level.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. That's so awesome. Do you feel, at this point in your life, do you feel like you've entered into manhood, adulthood? Do you feel like an adult, or are you, like, does that question make sense?
It does make sense.
Was there a point in your life where in your adult life that you didn't feel like one, and then now do you feel like one? Walk me through that process.
No, it's a beautiful question, and I appreciate you asking, because it's funny, I think of the last, like, yearish, I've really felt, not in the intermittent, but like, looking back now, I was like, oh, like, I thought the way that I was, like, showing up, like it just wasn't, like, not necessarily, like, manhood. But I also realized it's really helped me think about, like, what does manhood actually look like to me? So I think it was just all that to say, over the last, like, year, like, I've really thought about that question of, like, hey, what does manhood look like to me? But I don't think, no, I'm not, I don't think I've necessarily, like, felt like an adult or anything like that, because, like, one thing, I do have the perspective where it's like grown up's, like, not like a trap, but it's just the perspective of kind of, like, fun, where it's like, hey, like, I don't take myself that seriously, of just, like, but I also want to recognize, like, the incredible, like, privilege and blessing, where it's like, when I say, like, I haven't necessarily, like, experience like adulthood where it's like I don't know, in my mind, like when we talk about adulthood, like I always kind of also associate with tons of like responsibility. And I think in my life, like I'm so grateful that the way like my parents raised me and just the opportunities that have been afforded, as well too. It's like, like I've never necessarily had to worry about like a roof over my head or where the next meal is coming from, or just basic necessities like I can clothe myself, or I'm so blessed to take like nice like vacations, or play the sport that I love and everything like that. So like in terms of like adulthood, I think like I just, that's where my brain goes to, where I like think about like, oh, like like I haven't really like experienced like kind of like a full, not necessarily dose of responsibility, but it's like, hey, like I haven't necessarily like gone through that like struggle that I think a lot of adults really do like go through because of different circumstances, where it's like, hey, like I have to like truly like figure out like, hey, like where my next meal is going to come from, or like, hey, rent's due, and like I might not have enough or anything like that. So my brain kind of like goes there, where in a sense where it's like I haven't honestly necessarily like experienced it, and I want to like recognize like that's an incredibly like like privileged and blessed like viewpoint to like live life from. But then also kind of like the viewpoint of adulthood, where it's like, I don't, to me, like adulthood, like it also comes with like the connotation of like losing a lot of like kind of like that like play and inner child. And I think that's something I'm very grateful that I don't think, I mean, I'll ever lose of like, I'll never lose that kind of like connection of like that, like, hey, like, at the end of the day, kind of similar to what we're talking about, we're just like, hey man, we're all like humans here for the first time. Like we all make mistakes. Like it's kind of beautiful when you have that perspective of saying, like, hey, like you're just trying to do your best to figure out exactly how to live your life, like for the first time. And I'm trying to do the same. So when you have that perspective, you have a lot more like grace and patience for a lot of other like adults, or like realizing it's like hey, like I don't want to lose that part of me that like loves like playing and being a child, and anything like that as well too. And then to kind of like go to the second part of that about like manhood, like thinking over the last year of like, hey, like what does like manhood actually like look like for me. Like I've really like kind of like learned how to step more into a lot of kind of like like masculine energy, and like showing up as like I think kind of like manhood to me, like it's similar. Like, have you heard of a guy named Scott Galloway? Yeah, so he talks about men being providers, protectors, and then just having a lot of that energy of seeing, like, hey, like, men at like their truest form, like provide a lot of like safety, whether that's physical but also emotional safety. So I've noticed in the ways that I've shown up for kind of like relationships, whether it's like with girls, like I've noticed that I can do a lot of better job about like providing a lot more of that kind of like safety. I think overall, like I've done like a good partner, but I realized like, hey, like there's been ways that I've shown up relationships that like I haven't provided a space for her to be like emotionally like safe in some ways. So really taking a look at myself in the mirror, and thinking to myself like, oh, like how can I show up more better for relationships, not only with my future partner, but with my friends and family as well too. And then also just like being like true like protectors of, I think it's beautiful that just men are able to really like be like kind of masculine protective energies like in society, and really me stepping a lot more into that over the last year and a half has been awesome. But I think I didn't know what that meant or looked like for me for lots of my early 20s, and it took me until being like 26, 27, 28 to really like think about like what does like manhood look like for me, you know what I mean? And I think also at the end of the day, just from the way I was raised in a strong family, like manhood is like kind of like also just like, yeah, like being a father, and I'm super excited to like be a father one day. And even though I'm not necessarily like in that time of my life right now, like it's just like I'm really excited to do that one day as well.
Yeah, I think for sure, like when you become a father, I think that changes a lot. I'm not a father, but like,
Yeah,
of course, but also, I love what you said about, manhood largely, or the masculine energy largely being about protecting, providing, and showing up and creating that safe space for someone to sort of be themselves in. And that's something that I've talked about on the show before with other guests. And it's a cornerstone of how I show up in the world, and so I'm curious how what mechanisms do you use to provide that level of security and open-mindedness, safety for people to be themselves in around you?
Yeah. First off, so I also want to give you like your flowers, but where it's like, I know it's funny how we just met honestly like 4 or 5 days ago and kind of like hung out on a walk like you said, but I would like already say just from just like knowing you like in those like kind of 2 experiences, like I would say you do show up like in that kind of like
Thank you.
asking, like providing like very calm way of like, I feel like I can be like open in myself around you. So like kudos to you, bro, for
Thank
like
you.
bringing that energy and really being intentional about it. But for me, like what that kind of like looks like, and how I can have it is as simple as like, I think I really just have to take I really took a deep like look inwards of be like, okay, like in what ways was I feeling like insecure or projecting like fears onto other people, or really living from kind of like a scarcity or survival mindset. And I was bringing that energy into relationships with both like ex-girlfriends, but then also like my friends and family as well too. And really kind of taking a deep look and we're just like, hey man, like, while overall, like, again, like kind of having that grace for yourself, like, hey, like nobody's perfect, we're all human, like, but these were ways that like I messed up, or these were ways that I didn't show up, or these were ways that like I harmed someone else in like a relationship by like communicating in this certain way. I think just like really kind of like taking a deep look in the mirror, like, hey, like, okay, like I'm gonna be like
Accountability.
really like exactly taking accountability. Beautifully said. So one, like taking that accountability, and then two, just being intentional about kind of like bringing that like energy, like you said, to like all of my relationships and interactions, of being like, okay, like, like knowing that like this is who I am and having confidence in that. I intentionally show up for like my friends and family, and even though I'm not with a girlfriend or anything, like right now as well too, I can still bring that same kind of like provider and protector energy of like showing up for my friends and being like, hey man, like, like I'm here for you, or like you can open up to me. And so just being intentional about the ways that I show up for like my friends and family, and being a positive like role model for like other males, and doing my best each and every day to do that, is one of the ways that like I want to show up and actively strive to show up through those different mechanisms.
So we've covered a lot, and again, thank you, man, for opening up and for being vulnerable with me here today.
Yeah.
Sort of one last question I kind of have for you is, as you move through life, living as intentionally as you do, practicing your core values of, I'm going to try to nail them here, discipline, integrity, fun, and
You're good. Service. But exactly. Yeah.
And journaling, meditating, creating the safe space, trying to be conscious about stepping to manhood. Like, does any of this ever feel like a burden to you? Or does it feel heavy? Like, how do you manage that?
Dude, fantastic question. I think at points it has felt heavy. But then I realized I was thinking about it through, again, kind of like a scarcity, or like lack of like mindset of like oh, like like I have to do this, or I have to serve it, instead of flipping the mindset like, oh, I get to. So at times it has felt like a burden, but then I think I've just taken a step back and like reframed it from like, okay, like what lens was I looking at that through, and now it like bringing kind of like what we were talking about, even just like reframing that different perspective, where it's like I used to in golf like look at like pressure and nerves as like like nervousness, or just like don't mess up, and then I reframe it to excitement and opportunity and joy, similar to kind of like a lot of things where like I used to like at times feel like it was better, like, dude, like I gotta do this and I gotta do that, and I'm just trying to keep my head above water, which I think everybody can relate to at times. I think that's part of the beauty of life. And we were talking yesterday kind of like on a walk of just how like like the Buddhist view of life is like just kind of overall like suffering and going through that. But then I think like reframing that perspective, be like, oh, like I get to do all this, like I get to show up as a man with these values, and I get to show up as this amazing friend, and I get to do this opportunity and everything like that, and having, I think, excitement for that has really helped me kind of like just switch the perspective of like, oh, like, hey, this is not necessarily like a burden, it's more just like an opportunity. And I think also similar to being strong in my faith, where instead of like praying for like God to kind of like, like change circumstances or like take this away. It's like, hey God, I'm really feeling stressed about XYZ. Like please, like this go away. Like I've prayed, like no, like God, please like change my character and like give me strength and give me patience. And when you learn all of those characteristics of strength and patience, you realize like your shoulders kind of like broaden and you're able to carry more. And instead of like kind of like just like feeling that you had to kind of like put everything away or avoid it, I was like, hey, like no, like I'm strong enough now where I can carry a lot of things and I get to like, and I'm really grateful for that.
That's beautiful, man.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah. So gratitude.
Being
grateful that you're here and you get to do these things in the world. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you, bro.
Awesome, man. Well, again, thank you, dude, for coming on the show, for being so vulnerable, and for sharing what it's like to be you, what it's like to be JP. I really appreciate you, and I've enjoyed this time of connection with you. Anything else you want to share? Like, where can people find you? Anything you want to promote?
Yeah, thank you, bro. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is PCLE6522. And you'll find me out in the world just being me and connecting with different mental health charities as well too. So that was one that was mentioned, that the local one. It's called the Sims Foundation here in Austin, SIMS. Anything you can do to kind of like, just even spread the word of like, just talk about mental health more. If people listening to this feel inclined to financially support, it's an incredible charity support as well too. So, thank you, bro. I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate you, for being you and creating the space for people to come on, be themselves, share their story, talk about life, and you really hold space beautifully for that. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, bro.
So we got a closing tradition on the pod,
Okay.
where each guest leaves a book recommendation for the next guest without knowing who the next guest is going to be. So while you think about what your title is going to be, I will present you with the one that was left for you. It's called White Mirror by Tinkered Thinking. I have not read this. This was left for you by the previous guest. It's sci-fi, I think, and it's like a collection of stories, but it is yours.
Thank you. I'm excited to read this. It's also one of the coolest traditions that you do as well too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's your book recommendation for the next guest?
My book recommendation, I'm not my brain's like not really sure, but I believe so I was between two. One was going to be Soul Bloom by Rainn Wilson, but the one that I'm really going with, it's called Before and Laughter by Jimmy Carr.
Before and Laughter by Jimmy.
You know Jimmy Carr?
Yeah, he's a comedian. Yeah,
exactly. British comedian, and it's just a beautiful book of kind of a little bit about his perspective, his experiences. But I think I love his style of comedy because he really intertwines like humor and comedy, but also with like life lessons as well too. So it was a book that I read probably when I was like 21, 22, and it's a great book.
Sweet, man. Thank you.
And I appreciate you, Ryan.
Yeah, I appreciate you too, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, man.
Awesome.
You're the man, brother.
I'm excited to read this.
Yeah, it looks cool.
Yeah.
My buddy Yash sent it to me, or told me about it, or he was the last guest rather, but